She thought landing her dream job in Seoul was the best thing that ever happened to her, until she walked into the office and discovered her new CEO was the stranger she'd spent a passionate night with just days before. This is Loretta's story. And by the end, you'll be begging for part 2. Let's go. The champagne was still fizzing in Loretta Adeyemi's veins when she made the worst decision of her life. Or perhaps the best. She still couldn't decide, even now, standing in the gleaming lobby of Aurora Beauty Lab with her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Because 3 nights ago, in a dimly lit club in Apgujeong where bass notes shook the floor and inhibitions dissolved like sugar in rain, she'd met a man whose name she never learned. A man whose hands had mapped every inch of her skin in a hotel room overlooking the Han River. A man whose voice, rough with desire, had whispered promises in Korean and broken English until dawn painted the sky pink. A man who was now standing 15 feet away in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, introducing himself as Kang Minho, CEO of Aurora Beauty Lab, her new boss. Loretta's knees went liquid. The welcome packet trembled in her hands. Park Jae-won, the HR director who'd been enthusiastically explaining the company's revolutionary hyaluronic acid serum, continued talking, oblivious to the fact that Loretta's entire world had just fractured into 1,000 glittering pieces. Miho's eyes met hers across the marble expanse of the reception area. For one infinite second, she watched recognition flash across his face, watched his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly, watched something dark and hungry flicker in those obsidian eyes before his expression smoothed into professional neutrality, so complete it was almost an insult. He approached their small group with the confident stride of a man who owned not just this building, but possibly the entire Seongsadong skyline. "Ms. Park, I see you're introducing our new international marketing director," Minho said, his voice carrying that same smoky quality that had undone her completely 3 nights ago. Now it was clipped, businesslike, as cold as the air conditioning that raised goosebumps on Loretta's arms. "Ms. Adeyemi, welcome to Aurora Beauty Lab. I've reviewed your credentials. Your work with the Lagos market expansion at your previous company was impressive. I expect nothing less than excellence here." "Thank you, Mr. Kang," Loretta managed, and was proud that her voice emerged steady despite the chaos rioting through her bloodstream. "I'm excited to contribute to Aurora's global expansion, particularly in the West African market." His hand extended toward her. Professional. Impersonal. She had no choice but to take it. The moment their palms connected, electricity arced between them so intensely she half expected to see sparks. His fingers tightened around hers for a fraction of a second longer than necessary, and she watched his throat work as he swallowed. Then he released her as if she'd burned him. "Ms. Park, please ensure Ms. Adeyemi receives the full orientation. I'd like her to sit in on the executive strategy meeting this afternoon. 3 o'clock sharp." He shifted his attention back to Loretta, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I trust you can handle being thrown into the deep end immediately?" "I prefer it that way, actually," she replied, lifting her chin. Two could play at this game of pretending they were strangers. Pretending she hadn't traced the scar on his left shoulder blade with her tongue. Pretending she didn't know exactly what sounds he made when he lost control. Good. Something flickered in his expression, too quick to read. "Then I'll see you at 3. He turned and strode toward the private elevator bank, leaving a wake of expensive cologne and unspoken words. Jae-won was staring at her with barely concealed curiosity. "Wow, I've never seen Mr. Kang take such immediate interest in a new hire. You must have really impressed him with your portfolio." "I suppose so," Loretta murmured, watching the elevator doors close on Miho's retreating form. Her hands were shaking. She clasped them together, willing herself to breathe. This couldn't be happening. She'd researched Aurora Beauty Lab extensively. She'd studied the company's structure, the product lines, the market position. She'd looked at exactly one photo of the executive team on the website, a formal group shot where Kang Minho had been partially obscured by the VP of Operations. She'd been too focused on the job description, too excited about finally breaking into the Korean beauty industry, too desperate to prove herself capable of this leap. And now she was trapped. She'd signed a 3-year contract. She'd given up her apartment in Lagos, shipped her belongings across continents, said goodbye to her family and friends. All for a dream job that had just transformed into a waking nightmare. Or was it a fantasy? The memory of his mouth on hers, hot and demanding, flickered through her mind unbidden. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to banish the images. "Are you all right?" Jaiwon's hand touched her elbow gently. "You look a bit pale. The time difference can be brutal. Do you need water?" "I'm fine," Loretta lied, forcing a smile. "Just a bit overwhelmed by how beautiful everything is here." "This is really happening." "It really is." Jaiwon beamed at her. "Come on, let me show you your office. We gave you one of the corner spaces with a view of the Seongsa Bridge. Mr. Kang specifically requested it when he approved your hire." "Of course he did." Loretta followed Jaiwon through the sleek corridors of Aurora's headquarters, her mind spinning. Had he known? When he'd kissed her breathless in that club, when he'd whispered her name like a prayer, when he'd held her afterward with unexpected tenderness, had he known she was about to become his employee? No. Impossible. His shock had been genuine. Which meant this coincidence was exactly that, a cruel twist of fate. The office was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a panoramic view of Seoul's gleaming skyline. The desk was minimalist white oak, the chair ergonomic leather, the computer setup state-of-the-art. A welcome basket sat on the credenza, filled with Aurora's latest product launches. Loretta barely saw any of it. She was too busy trying to calculate the impossible math of this situation. Professional ethics dictated clear boundaries between superiors and subordinates. Aurora's employee handbook, which she'd studied on the flight from Lagos, explicitly forbade romantic relationships between executives and their direct reports. Violation could result in immediate termination. She'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to throw it all away for a man she'd known for exactly one night. But what a night it had been. She sank into her chair, pressing her palms against her eyes. She could still feel the weight of him, still hear the rough catch in his breathing, still taste the whiskey on his tongue. Stop. She had to stop. This was her career, her future, everything she'd worked toward since graduating top of her class with a marketing degree and spending 5 years clawing her way up in Lagos's competitive beauty industry. She was here to prove that an African woman could not only survive, but thrive in Seoul's cutthroat corporate landscape. She was here to open doors for others who looked like her. Romance, especially forbidden romance with her married CEO. Wait, was he married? Her fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up Aurora Beauty Lab's executive profiles. Kang Minho, age 35, MBA from Stanford, returned to Seoul 8 years ago to transform his family's modest cosmetics company into a K-beauty powerhouse valued at over $2 billion. Relationship status, not listed. But that meant nothing. In Korea's corporate culture, personal lives were kept meticulously private. She dove deeper, checking Korean business news sites, social media. Nothing. The man was a ghost outside of business contexts. Which was probably how he'd managed to go to a club alone and pick up a foreign woman without causing a scandal. A knock on her door made her jump. Choi Dian, a junior designer she'd been introduced to during the tour, poked her head in with a friendly smile. "Hey, sorry to interrupt your first day chaos. I just wanted to say welcome officially and warn you that the 3 o'clock executive meeting is brutal. Mr. Kang doesn't tolerate anything less than perfection. He once made a VP redo an entire quarter's strategy because of a single inconsistent metric in a slide deck." "Thanks for the heads up," Loretta said, grateful for the distraction. "I'll make sure I'm prepared. You seem cool though. I have a good feeling about you." Dian gave her a thumbs up and disappeared. Cool. Right. Loretta was the opposite of cool. She was a disaster wrapped in professional attire, waiting to explode. She spent the next 2 hours preparing for the meeting, reviewing every document she'd been sent about Aurora's current market position, their expansion strategies, their competitor analysis. Work had always been her refuge. She let the familiar comfort of data and analysis steady her nerves. By the time 3 o'clock approached, she'd almost convinced herself she could handle this. The executive conference room was all glass and chrome, dominated by a massive table that reflected the LED screens displaying real-time sales data from Aurora's global markets. 10 executives were already seated when Loretta entered. Minho sat at the head of the table, his jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows in a way that should have been casual, but somehow made him look even more commanding. He glanced up as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Adeyemi, please sit." He gestured to an empty chair directly across from him. Of course. She'd be forced to look at him for the entire meeting. She settled into the chair, crossing her legs and opening her tablet with what she hoped was calm professionalism. Let's begin. Ms. Adeyemi is joining us from Lagos, where she successfully led the West African market expansion for Lumiere Cosmetics. I've asked her to observe today and provide fresh perspective on our Q3 strategy. The meeting was intense. Executives presented quarterly projections, debated marketing approaches, analyzed competitor movements. Minho ran the meeting with precision, his questions sharp, his expectations clear. He was brilliant, Loretta realized with sinking certainty. She watched him dissect a flawed logistics proposal with surgical accuracy, watched him praise innovative thinking, watched him command the room with effortless authority. This was the man underneath the desire, underneath the chemistry. This was who he really was. And he was magnificent. Ms. Adeyemi. His voice cut through her thoughts. You've been quiet. What's your assessment of our Nigerian market approach? Every eye turned to her. This was a test. She could feel it. He was challenging her, pushing her, seeing if she'd crumble under pressure. She met his gaze directly, refusing to look away. Your approach is too conservative. You're treating Lagos like a secondary market when it should be primary. The Nigerian middle class is exploding, and they're hungry for premium K-beauty products. But you're marketing like you're afraid of them. Your price points are too low, which signals inferior quality. Your distribution is too limited. You're leaving money on the table. Silence descended. Several executives shifted uncomfortably. Minho leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his eyes never leaving hers. Continue. Korean beauty products have cachet in Nigeria precisely because they're Korean. Because they're aspirational. Women in Lagos want what's working in Seoul, London, New York. They don't want a watered-down version. They want the real thing, and they'll pay for it. Your current strategy undersells both the product and the consumer. She pulled up a presentation she'd prepared weeks ago, before she'd even accepted the job, back when Aurora was just a dream. I've outlined a revised approach here. Premium positioning, influencer partnerships with Lagos's top beauty content creators, pop-up experiences in Victoria Island and Lekki, strategic placement in high-end malls. You treat Nigeria like the sophisticated market it is, and revenue will triple within 18 months. She finished and waited. The silence stretched. Then Minho smiled. It was small, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his entire face. This is exactly the kind of thinking we need. Ms. Adeyemi, I want a full proposal on my desk by end of week. The meeting concluded 20 minutes later. Executives filed out, several stopping to congratulate Loretta on her presentation. She gathered her materials slowly, hyper-aware that Minho remained seated at the head of the table, his attention fixed on his laptop, but his presence filling the room like smoke. When the last executive left and the door clicked shut, the silence became deafening. That was impressive, he said without looking up. You didn't hold back. You told me you expected excellence. She kept her voice steady, professional. I'm here to deliver it. Are we going to talk about it? He finally raised his eyes to hers, and the raw intensity there stole her breath. Or are we going to pretend that night never happened? You're the one who said it never happened. In the lobby this morning. Welcome to Aurora, I expect excellence, like I was any other new hire. Because you are. He stood abruptly, moving to the windows overlooking the city. His reflection was ghost-like in the glass. That night, I didn't know who you were. I didn't know you'd be walking into my company 3 days later. If I had known. What? She stood too, unable to stop herself from moving closer. You wouldn't have touched me? You wouldn't have kissed me like I was air and you were drowning? You wouldn't have made me feel things I've never felt before. He spun to face her, and she saw the same hunger she felt reflected in his eyes. No, I wouldn't have. Because this, he gestured between them, this is impossible. You understand that, don't you? Company policy explicitly forbids relationships between executives and their direct reports. I sit on the board. You report directly to me through the marketing chain. If anyone found out, no one will find out because there's nothing to find out. She forced the words past the ache in her throat. It was one night. A mistake. We're both adults. We can move past it. Can we? He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, that intoxicating blend of cedar and bergamot that had clung to her skin the next morning. Because I've spent the last 3 hours watching you take command of that room, watching you challenge men twice your age with twice your experience, watching you be absolutely brilliant, and all I can think about is how you tasted. Stop. The word came out breathless, desperate. You can't say things like that. Why not? We're alone. The room isn't monitored. He reached out, his fingers barely brushing her wrist, and even that whisper of contact sent fire racing up her arm. Loretta, I haven't stopped thinking about you. I've tried. God knows I've tried. But you're here now, and I don't know how to pretend you're just another employee when I know what you sound like when you come apart. She jerked back, putting distance between them before she did something catastrophic like kiss him. We have to pretend. My career depends on it. Your company depends on it. What happened was beautiful and terrible, and it's over. It has to be over. Something flickered across his face, pain maybe, or frustration. You're right. Of course you're right. He straightened his tie, his expression shuddering. I apologize. That was inappropriate. It won't happen again. Good. She gathered her tablet, her hands shaking. I should go. I have work to do. Loretta. Her name on his lips was torture. She paused at the door but didn't turn around. For what it's worth, I wish circumstances were different. I wish I'd met you anywhere but here. But you didn't, she whispered. And wishes don't change reality. She fled before he could respond, before she could see if her words had landed like the blows they felt like leaving her mouth. The elevator ride to her floor was endless. She made it to her office, closed the door, and pressed her back against it, breathing hard. This was going to destroy her. Not the job, not the challenge of breaking into a new market. Him. The impossibility of him. She'd come to Seoul to build her career, not to fall for a man she could never have. Except she was already falling. Had been falling since he'd smiled at her in that club and asked if she liked whiskey. Had been falling when he'd admitted he usually never did this, never picked up strangers, but there was something about her smile that made him want to be reckless. Had been falling when he'd held her afterward and talked about his dreams of making Aurora a global brand that rivaled the French and American beauty giants, about proving that Korean innovation could dominate any market. She'd talked about her own dreams, about being a bridge between African consumers and international brands, about changing the narrative that African markets were somehow less sophisticated or valuable. They'd talked until dawn, their bodies tangled together, their words weaving connections deeper than physical desire. And then he'd kissed her forehead and slipped away while she dozed, leaving only a note that said, "Thank you for an unforgettable night." She'd thought she'd never see him again. She'd mourned that loss even as she'd told herself it was better this way, cleaner. Now she understood fate had a vicious sense of humor. The weeks that followed were exquisite torture. Loretta threw herself into work with manic intensity, developing her Nigerian market proposal into a comprehensive strategy that addressed everything from supply chain logistics to cultural marketing sensitivity. She worked late into the night, partly because she was genuinely passionate about the project, partly because it kept her from thinking about Minho. Except he was everywhere. His signature on approval documents. His notes in margins of reports. His presence in the executive dining room where she sometimes grabbed lunch. They maintained scrupulous professionalism in public. They never spoke alone. But the tension was always there, crackling like static electricity before a storm. "You look exhausted," Diane commented one evening, finding Loretta still at her desk at 9 o'clock. "This job isn't worth killing yourself over." "I'm fine," Loretta insisted, rubbing her burning eyes. Just want to make sure this proposal is perfect before I submit it. Perfectionism is a trap in this industry. Trust me, I learned that the hard way. Dean perched on the edge of her desk. Although I have to say, Mr. Kang seems more invested in your success than I've seen him with anyone else. He asks about your progress constantly. It's kind of sweet, actually. Loretta's heart stuttered. He's just ensuring the Nigerian expansion succeeds. It's a significant investment. Maybe. Dean's smile was knowing. Or maybe he's just invested in you. Before Loretta could formulate a response that wouldn't reveal too much, her office phone rang. Internal extension. Executive floor. Her pulse jumped. Loretta Adiemi speaking. My office. Now. Miho's voice was clipped, professional, but she heard something underneath. Urgency. Need. We need to discuss the proposal before you finalize it. It's 9:30 at night, she said carefully, aware of Dean listening with unabashed curiosity. I'm aware of the time. This is important. He hung up. Dean raised an eyebrow. See? Invested. Loretta grabbed her tablet and headed for the elevator, her mind racing. The executive floor was deserted at this hour, the lights dimmed, the usual hum of activity replaced by eerie quiet. Miho's office door was ajar. She knocked softly before entering. He was standing by the windows again, his silhouette dark against the glittering Seoul skyline. He'd loosened his tie, unbuttoned his collar. He looked as exhausted as she felt. Close the door, he said without turning. She hesitated, then complied. The click of the lock seemed thunderously loud. You said we needed to discuss the proposal. I lied. He finally faced her, and the naked want in his expression nearly brought her to her knees. I can't do this anymore, Loretta. I can't pretend you're just an employee. I can't pretend I don't think about you every second of every day. I can't pretend I don't want to throw every policy and rule out that window and make you mine. Miho. His name was a plea, a warning, a surrender all at once. We agreed. I know what we agreed. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, his hands framing her face with devastating gentleness. And I've tried. I've tried so damn hard to stay away from you. But you're brilliant and beautiful, and you challenge me, and you make me want things I have no right to want. Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me I'm alone in this madness. She should lie. She should push him away and run and never look back. Instead, she fisted her hands in his shirt and pulled him down to her. You're not alone. The kiss detonated between them like a bomb. His mouth claimed hers with desperate hunger, and she met him with equal ferocity, months of denied wanting pouring out in a clash of lips and teeth and tongues. He backed her against the door, his body pinning hers, and she couldn't get close enough, couldn't breathe, couldn't think beyond the taste of him and the feel of his hands sliding under her blouse to find bare skin. We shouldn't, she gasped against his mouth even as her fingers worked the buttons of his shirt. I know, he growled, trailing burning kisses down her throat. We should stop. We should definitely stop. She arched into him as his teeth grazed her collarbone. Neither of them stopped. They made it to the leather couch in his office, hands frantic, clothes discarded in a trail across expensive carpet. And then there was nothing but sensation, the slick slide of skin on skin, the ragged harmony of their breathing, the way he whispered her name like a prayer and a curse. It was different from that first night. More desperate. More dangerous. Because now they knew exactly what they stood to lose. Afterward, they lay tangled together, their hearts gradually slowing, reality creeping back in like cold water. Loretta traced the scar on his shoulder blade, the one she'd asked about that first night. He'd gotten it in a car accident at 16, he'd told her. The same accident that killed his younger sister and made him promise his parents he'd make something of the family business, that her death wouldn't be meaningless. This is insane, she whispered. If anyone finds out, no one will find out. He tightened his arms around her. We'll be careful. Discreet. And what exactly is this? An affair? A fling. The words tasted bitter. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes fierce. It's everything. You're everything. I don't have neat words for it yet, but it's not casual, Loretta. Not for me. Not for me either, she admitted, terrified by the truth of it. But that makes it worse, doesn't it? If we cared less, it would be easier to walk away. I'm not walking away. He kissed her softly, thoroughly. I don't care what we have to do, what rules we have to break. I'm not losing you again. They began an affair that consumed them both. Stolen moments in his office after everyone left. Weekend trips to a private hammock in Buckshin that he rented under a false name. Late-night phone calls where they talked for hours about everything and nothing. It was reckless and intoxicating, and Loretta knew she was in too deep but couldn't bring herself to care. For the first time in her life, she understood why people made catastrophically bad decisions for love. Because Minho made her feel alive in ways she'd never imagined. He challenged her intellectually, supported her professionally, worshipped her physically. He made her laugh. He made her believe she could conquer the world. But he also made her paranoid. Every glance from a coworker felt loaded with suspicion. Every whispered conversation in the break room felt like it must be about them. And his jealousy, which had seemed almost flattering at first, began to show edges sharp enough to cut. When James Park, a British consultant hired to advise on European expansion, started spending time with Loretta to learn about her marketing approaches, Minho's reaction was volcanic. He was touching your arm, Minho said coldly, cornering her in the parking garage after watching them talk at a company lunch. He was being friendly. That's what colleagues do. Loretta tried to keep her voice level, but frustration bubbled underneath. Friendly. He laughed, the sound harsh. He wants you, Loretta. Any idiot can see it. And what if he does? You don't own me, Minho. We're not even supposed to be together. His jaw clenched. So that's it? Because we have to hide, you're free to entertain other men. I'm not entertaining anyone. I'm doing my job. Which is what I came to Seoul to do, remember? She pushed past him toward her car, anger finally winning over desire. You don't get to be possessive when you won't even acknowledge me in public. He caught her wrist, spinning her back. Don't. The single word vibrated with barely leashed emotion. Don't what? Don't point out the truth? We're living a lie, Minho. Sneaking around like criminals. And now you want to police who I talk to. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. This isn't sustainable. Then what do you want from me? He released her wrist, but didn't step back. You want me to go public? Announce to the board that I'm sleeping with my employee? Watch them force me to choose between you and the company my sister died for me to build. The words hit like physical blows. Loretta steadied herself against her car. I never asked you to choose. But that's what it would come to. His voice gentled, regret replacing anger. Baby, I'm sorry. You're right. I don't have the right to be jealous when I can't claim you. But it kills me, watching other men look at you and knowing they can pursue you openly while I have to pretend you're just another employee. They made up the way they always did, passionate and desperate, in the back seat of his car like teenagers. But the cracks were showing. And 2 weeks later, they shattered completely. Loretta was working late, finalizing the Nigerian expansion budget, when she heard voices in the executive corridor. Male voices. She recognized Minho's father, the company chairman, and another senior executive. They were speaking Korean, assuming privacy, not knowing she'd been studying the language intensively since arriving in Seoul. The Seo family merger must proceed. Everything depends on Minho's marriage to Yuna. The chairman's voice was firm, brooking no argument. The wedding is scheduled for June. The announcement at the spring gala will make it official. Has Minho agreed to the timeline? The executive asked. He doesn't have a choice. Seo Pharmaceuticals' investment is the only thing preventing the Chinese acquisition. And Yuna's father won't sign unless his daughter is secured as the next chairwoman of Aurora. It's business, pure and simple. Minho understands that. Their voices faded. Loretta sat frozen, the words echoing in her skull. Marriage. Wedding. June. She stumbled to the bathroom and vomited, her body rejecting the information her mind couldn't process. Minho was engaged. To Seo Yuna, daughter of pharmaceutical royalty. An arranged marriage, a business merger disguised as romance. And he'd never told her. She'd given him everything, risked everything, and he'd been planning a wedding the entire time. She made it back to her office, grabbed her things with shaking hands, and left. She didn't go home. She couldn't. Instead, she walked along the Han River until her feet blistered and the sun rose over the water. Her phone buzzed constantly. Minho. She ignored every call, every text. At 9 in the morning, she finally answered. Where are you? His voice was frantic. I've been losing my mind. Why didn't you tell me you were engaged? The question came out eerily calm. Silence. Long enough to confirm everything. Where did you hear that? Does it matter? Is it true? Loretta, let me explain. It's not what you think. Then what is it, Minho? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been lying to me for months while planning a wedding. Tears finally came, hot and angry. It's arranged. A business deal. My father set it up years ago, and I've been trying to find a way out, but the company needs the Seoul family investment. Without it, we'll be forced into a hostile takeover. Everything my family built will be destroyed. So you chose the company over telling me the truth. I chose to buy time to figure out how to have both. His voice broke. I love you, Loretta. I'm in love with you. I think I have been since that first night in Gangnam. The engagement to Yuna is paper, nothing more. She knows I don't love her. It's purely transactional. Does she know about me? Silence again. Answer enough. I need space, Loretta said, her voice hollow. I need to think. Don't do this. Don't shut me out. You shut me out the moment you decided I didn't deserve the truth. Goodbye, Minho. She hung up and turned off her phone. The next day, she submitted a transfer request to Aurora's Singapore office. It was denied. She was too integral to the Nigerian expansion, HR explained politely. She was trapped. Trapped in a company owned by a man who'd broken her heart. Trapped in a country thousands of miles from home. Trapped in love with someone she could never have. So she did the only thing she could. She tried to move on. When her friend introduced her to Daniel Kim, a kind, successful investment banker with no complications and no secrets, she said yes to dinner. And then to a second date. Daniel was easy. Safe. He made her laugh without making her ache. He took her to nice restaurants and didn't make her feel like she was betraying herself just by existing. He was everything Minho couldn't be, available, honest, uncomplicated. Minho watched from a distance, his expression growing more haunted by the day. They didn't speak beyond what work required. The Nigerian expansion launched successfully. Loretta's strategies exceeded projections. She should have been celebrating. Instead, she felt hollow. And then the invitation arrived. Aurora Beauty Lab's Spring Gala. Black tie. Mandatory attendance for all executives. The night Minho and Yuna's engagement would be announced publicly. Will you come with me? Daniel asked over dinner, his hand covering hers. I know corporate events aren't exactly thrilling, but I'd love to have you on my arm. She should say no. Should claim illness, family emergency, anything to avoid witnessing Minho pledge his future to another woman. But that would be cowardice. So she smiled and said, I'd be honored. The night of the gala, Loretta wore crimson. A dress that hugged every curve, that made her skin glow, that armored her in beauty and confidence even as her heart crumbled. Daniel picked her up with flowers and compliments. They arrived at the Signal Seoul ballroom to find it transformed into a wonderland of orchids and crystal, hundreds of Seoul's business elite mingling beneath chandeliers. And there was Minho, in a midnight blue suit that made him look like sin incarnated. Yuna on his arm, ethereal and white, looking every inch the perfect corporate bride. Their eyes met across the ballroom. The world contracted to that single point of connection. She watched his gaze travel over her dress, watched his jaw clench, watched something break behind his eyes. Then Yuna claimed his attention and the moment shattered. Dinner was torture. Speeches. Toasts. Business announcements. And then Minho's father took the stage. It gives me great pleasure to announce the engagement of my son, Kang Minho, to Seo Yuna, uniting two of Korea's most prestigious families. Applause erupted. Loretta couldn't breathe. She rose abruptly, murmuring apologies to Daniel, and fled to the terrace. Seoul sprawled below, lights glittering like false promises. She gripped the railing, willing herself not to break, not here, not now. Loretta. His voice. Always his voice. She didn't turn. Run away with me. Right now. We'll disappear. Start over somewhere they'll never find us. You know I can't ask you to do that. She finally faced him, letting him see her tears. Your family, your company, hundreds of jobs. I won't be the reason it all falls apart. Then I'll be reason. I'll tell my father I won't marry her. I'll find another way to save the company. There is no other way. You said it yourself. She touched his face one last time, memorizing the angle of his jaw, the warmth of his skin. You have to marry her, Minho. And I have to let you go. Inside, applause swelled. Their engagement was official. Minho pulled her close, and they stood there, holding each other as their world ended. Then Loretta stepped back, turned away, and walked into the Seoul night alone, leaving her heart shattered on a terrace overlooking a city of lights that no longer felt like home. Wait, you think that's how this ends? Oh no. Part 2 is where this story really begins. Minho makes a move that shocks everyone. Loretta faces an impossible decision. And that wedding? Let's just say not everyone makes it to I do. Like and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want notifications for what comes next.